So it's very useful to suspend all the judgment that we have about an emotion, good or bad, and just open to it and experience it deeply. And then usually there is an insight that adds to our intelligence that makes it more likely when a particular emotion comes that that intelligence is present.
I want to ask you a question about this survival mechanism, but it's a perfect time for me to add in a question here because Brian, let me see if I can find Brian's question. It had to do with the fact that when he does inquiry, sometimes he can't tell if he's actually just working it out in his mind, how sometimes when you're doing inquiry, say I'm really angry about something and I let myself feel the anger of that and I go deeper into that. And then I have a realization like, oh, wait a minute, it could be something very practical. Like, oh, maybe I didn't read that email correctly. But I think what he's saying is he doesn't know if he's just like making his mind sort it out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't see what the problem is. What if your mind is sorting it out? That sounds like that's a plus for your mind. You don't need to print the block letters every time if you know how to write. And you also can tell the truth. Am I just making up these steps to feel better about myself? And in that, then you're just open again. You don't know anything. But it's very useful. I think it would be very unuseful if we felt that every emotion that appeared, we had to, stop and just feel it and go to the core of it. What a waste of time. Why not take a moment with some really big emotion that haunts you or grabs you or triggers you and open to it and get it so deeply that it doesn't have that same power with you. Then you experience it, you get angry or you get sad or you get fearful, and it just passes through. It's not a process. That's what I'm saying. You don't have to process it. We can be free of our process, meaning that if process is necessary, it's obvious it is. But we somehow think in our spiritual community that process is holy. Or it's not. It can be very useful, like yoga. It's a kind of yoga of the mind, of really working it out. But if we start to worship it, we also enclose our lives in process rather than living in wonder and discovery.
I had that written down in my notes. I wanted to ask you must be psychic again, because I think of those of us on a spiritual path, and it seems to me in my almost 30 years on a spiritual path, there's either one camp that's all about transcending emotion, and then there's the other camp of I need to process my feelings. And somewhere in the midst of that is what you're talking about, it seems to me.
I think we have to really go back to the beginning of our relationship with our emotions, just as we do with the relationship with our physical body or our thoughts, and recognize that they have a hold on us because we are superstitious about them. We think they mean something about who we are. So that if we feel blissful, it means we're really doing something right, or God is gracing us, or the world is actually a good place. And if we feel the opposite of that, we usually have opposite thoughts that accompany it, and we believe them. So my purpose in speaking to people and meeting people is to loosen that knot of superstitious belief, that the anger that courses through you, or the fear, or the joy, or the despair, or the bliss, has anything to do with the truth of who you are. It's emotions, just like your kidney functioning, or your heart beating, or your lungs functioning, or physical aspects. They have to do with your body, and your emotions have to do with your body, but you are already free of emotions. So if we can, at the beginning, recognize what is free of emotions, even in the midst of the body and the mind being caught by an emotional storm, then it's not even process or not process, or transcendence or not transcendence. It's something that's never been spoken.
There was a question here. These are like they're all just completely set up for what you're saying, but there was a question here that came in to our email, Gangaji Radio email, and it's from Susan, and she says, I believe I have heard you say we can't count on emotion to show us the way to enlightenment or pure consciousness. I'm wondering how I know when I have found the joy that you speak of. Shall I continue?
Well, that question doesn't arise. When you found the joy that has nothing to do with any condition, it doesn't have anything to do with any denial that the mind may throw in. Is this it or is this not it? Is irrelevant. Even if you determine it's not it, it's irrelevant because it's so full and it's so big and it's so present.
The thing I wanted to say about survival was that, like, there are people that who are in the midst of survival who have just gone through a couple of terrible earthquakes. There's that kind of survival. But when it comes to emotion, it almost feels like the same thing in a not so sane way, that we feel like we have to manage our emotions like it's an emergency. I feel this thing in my body, I feel this emotion, and I have to do something about it now.
I think there's that, and there's also just the sort of carrying the weight of a particular emotion, which could be a depression finally, or a sadness, or any of the emotions, carrying it as a weight where it feels like it's a constant thing that's on one's back. And for both of those situations and everything in between, you can actually recognize that there's something here and open to it, not process it, not fix it, not get beyond it, not transcend it, not act it out, not repress it, just open to it. And that's what inquiry, the word inquiry, points to, is opening the mind, stopping the management, stopping the control, and meeting whatever is being felt, whether you feel like it's been with you all your life or you feel like your neighbor caused it this morning, just to open to it. Then this is different from how you act on it. You may act on it or you may not, but to be willing and to have the privilege and the time to not be in an earthquake, to have this moment where your life is not threatened, and just open to whatever is here. If there is an emotion here, just to open to it. It's so simple, but it's so simple that we normally just push it out of the way and make it more complicated. And that's worshiping the cognitive aspect of our brain. And that's why it was very radical for me to meet Papaji and have him say, just stop. I mean, I totally identified myself as an emotional being. And I either sometimes thought it was my curse, and sometimes I thought it was my blessing. It made me special. It made me deep. And he said, stop. And it was just reveal to be much ado about nothing. It doesn't mean emotions don't come through. It doesn't mean I'm happy all the time. But, it rained twice today, and then the sun came out, and then the clouds came out. Does that mean nature was absent at any point, or life was absent, or this mystery was absent? And that's what I mean when I talk about superstitious thinking. We're very superstitious about our emotions. And in our willingness to meet them, that superstition is broken. It's interrupted. It's like meeting your idea of God, or meeting your worthlessness, or whatever it may be. Those are ways that we are in bondage. So it's an invitation to be free. Oh, love, I'm glad you brought that word up, because I just want to say that love is not an emotion, that love is not affected by any emotion. And when we minimize love into an emotion that means feeling good or feeling open and not feeling angry or not feeling fearful, we really diminish this discovery of the depth and the texture of what it means to live as love. And I don't mean that as love in quotation marks. I mean really as this incomprehensible force of being that all emotions flood through. And, sometimes the most compassionate act is actually to kill someone on their deathbed. It's actually to serve them out of love. Or it can be filled with love and compassion when you actually say no to someone, or you say, I don't like that, or that was wrong. So if we remove love from the emotional definition, then maybe the emotions won't have such power on us. They're just like we have a stomachache. Does a stomachache mean that that's who we are? It doesn't feel good, and we may identify with it, but a stomachache comes and goes, and it doesn't touch the radiance of being. You can lose an arm or a leg or use of both arms and legs, and still the radiance of being is present. The same is true with emotions. You have a habit of an emotion. Does that touch the radiance that's underneath? In our worship of the superstition of emotions, we think it does because we don't open to it to see that the radiance is here. It's always here.